So today I'm introducing Susan Rostow. You all know her because that's why you're here, and Susan is primarily known for her printmaking, and because she is inventive and creative, she has developed a non-toxic ink for printmaking called Akua, which you may know. And she has taken printmaking to another level, because all of these works that you see here today are made out of paper, and they're all made out of printed material that she's printed on her press, and somehow configured into these extraordinary forms. And she used John Prine's song as a metaphor for this show, which is really about kind of feeling invisible and kind of wanting to express yourself. And all of us of a certain age can relate to that kind of mentality. And it's extraordinary. Thank you so much for coming out in this not so horrible weather today, but potentially horrible weather. Anything else I need to say about it?
Thank you. That was such a great introduction.
Good.
Maybe I have nothing else to say. That was wonderful. Thank you, Ronnie. And thank you all for coming out. This is a wonderful turnout. I was not expecting anyone to show up because we've all been traumatized last week about being in the floods and having that warning again. I just really appreciate you taking your chances, and I hope everybody makes it home safely. So, I thought I'd start out with, there's the three most popular questions people ask me. One is, what was in your mind? How you know, what's your process, and what are the materials you use? And then the third is, my favorite, is, are you on drugs? And so I'm going to start with the easy one. No, I am not on drugs. I never get high in my studio. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about the materials, and then I'm going to go through my thoughts. And so, yes, I started out as a printmaker, so my background is in print on paper. And I always start out my work by printing, maybe out of habit, or it's a reference point for me to come up with my original ideas. And in this case, the prints are all kind of fossil, but kind of flower, and there are different processes. They're all differently printed so that they resemble each other, but they all, like the monoprints, they're slightly different. But I wanted to give a sense of kind of a floral, but not really a flower. And I'll talk a little more about that. So from printmaking, I went into book arts. The book arts gave me a place to put my prints and bind them together. And my earlier sculptural works were more about sculptural books. And they did not require an amateur or anything like that, where an amateur. And so they were more like the smaller sculptures, that size. But as soon as I started approaching large-scale sculpture, my husband, William Jung, who is a sculptor teacher, told me I needed the armature. So it became a whole other challenge, and I also realized that working within my studio, the size and the doorways, that this was about the same size that I could actually work. So I started working, they're just about my size, maybe a little shorter, and I worked in a very similar way as I did with the books, except the book had a sort of a spine to it, and everything was attached. This gave me the liberty of attaching things anywhere I wanted. And it brought my prints to another dimension. And once I have the structures completed, that's when my favorite part, that's like putting the icing on the cake. That's when I start doing all the surface design. I make all my own materials. I use paper, clay. I combine different kinds of gums, like gum arabic and so forth, and pigments in with different gritty things like sand, crushed glass, maybe a little mud, a little clay, things like that, that I just kind of, I don't have a single recipe, but I just take whatever I feel needs smooth or needs rough or needs, some of these pieces actually have wool. This is alpaca wool, unspun, just ordered it from farms that just sell it without having it into the yarn kind of stage. So basically that's how I make the work, and why I make the work, and what was going on in my head this time. I always feel like every time I show my work, it's like the next progression from the last. And I started this work about, I guess it was in the spring. It was like March. It was the end of another show. And a woman came up to me at the show that I was in last, and some of the pieces were about this high. And she said, she just came in off the street, and she says to me, "I love your work, but it's repulsive and beautiful at the same time." And I never thought of my work as being repulsive. I never thought of it about being beautiful either, but there was something about it that I just couldn't get it out of my mind. Like, what did she mean by repulsive? I would call it grotesque. And then I was getting like too obsessed about the definition. I thought, well, I gotta start exploring with that. So that was in March. And then as I started with this piece, and I'm like, let me do the most repulsive thing I could do. And I started just with this head. And when I work, I like to have several pieces going on at one time. Not only because technically things have to dry and I jump, but mentally I need to change my thoughts. So, you know, if you're in your studio every day and you're there for hours, or maybe 5 hours a day, your moods, for me, it's like 1 minute I'm in the morning and I'm happy, I just had my coffee, and then by 12 o'clock I'm like drowsy. Or, you know, 1 minute I'm like happy, and 1 minute I'm like really sad. So much emotion goes into the work. So when I see I'm getting like, whoa, too repulsive, then I may jump to another piece. And by doing that, I feel like I'm able to sort of take the whole picture, the whole gamut of what's going on in my mind. And so I started out with this piece, and then I would jump to that one and that one and that one. And then when things got to be too textured, I felt like, oh, is that what makes it repulsive, when you don't have the balance of the smooth with the texture? So then I would play around with like smooth things, and I started doing the wall piece. And I brightened up the colors, like some of the smaller sculptures I was working on, and this piece, didn't have as much bright color. So then I was thinking, well, if I add more bright color, will it be brighter? Will that be more beautiful if it's bright color? So towards the end of this one, I put the lipstick on it. And the title for this piece is Lipstick Too Much. So I was kind of playing around with things I wouldn't do for myself. Like, I usually just wear black. I was very brave this year. I got pink glasses. But normally, I'm very like earth color. And I thought, I really want to experiment with bright colors and how that may affect how someone sees you. Is it more beautiful just because it has color? I don't know. I don't have answers, and I don't have judgments. I'm not making any kind of judgment about whether or not women should wear makeup or women should do their nails or their hair. It's not about that. I just was playing around and exploring and not making any kind of assumptions that this is the answer to anything. I have no answers. So from there, I started working on this piece, and I wasn't even sure if I was gonna complete it. And I got to the point where it was like, I'm gonna stop before I think it's finished. And I let it go, and then I started photographing myself holding it and moving it. Then I got into a stop motion animation. And so that piece is the piece that was used in the animation, which is on the wall, embedded into a video frame. And that the video became part of the piece, the wall piece. The wall pieces are all called wallflowers. And I was playing around with the idea of having fun with the humor of it all. I always find that humor when things get really rough for me, I have to make a joke, kind of have to keep myself humored all the time when I'm alone or if I'm with other people. There's just something about, I don't like to get too deep. So I balance humor with sadness. I balance color with no color. I balance the real gritty texture with smooth paper. So that when one thing goes too much to one way, I have to go the opposite force. And so this piece reminds me of, like, I'm not a multitasker. I can only focus on one thing at a time, but there are moments when I get so overwhelmed, I feel like I'm like this all over the place. So this piece became the multitasker. So each one became like part of my thoughts, my temperaments, of like not only with the piece itself, but with the titles. This is called A Real Neck Bender. So as I was coming up with the titles for the pieces as I was doing it, I was also thinking about the title of the show. And when I was, I guess my late teens, early, maybe 20 the most, John Prine came out with the song. He was 22 when he wrote it. He's an American kind of folk songwriter and singer, and he came out with the song, Hello in There. My friend Eileen actually mentioned it to me. We were in the car, and we were talking about the song. Eileen and I grew up together, so she knew me then. And I thought, wow, that's such a great concept, Hello in There. And I was working a lot with mirrors at the time as well. So I kept thinking that as I'm working, if I embed these mirrors, I can see myself in the sculptures and become part of it. So I kept thinking about that hello in there. And as I progressed, I didn't really want to use the title Hello in There, so I thought it as a response to John Prine. And he was talking about when he worked in a nursing home when he was 20 years old, and he would go to the nursing home, and some of the older people there didn't have any visitors, and they would pretend that he was their grandson. So he wrote this song, and it's so, if you haven't heard of it, you should just Google it, and you can find it on YouTube. And it's like such a melancholy, sad song. And so I titled the show Hello From Here as my response to him, or response to his words in the song. And so that's how that came about. And the pieces do have the mirrors, and when you walk by, you catch a glimpse of yourself. so often, like I walk by a mirror nowadays. Did I say that I was having my birthday? I didn't talk about that. So all along this, I'm going through all of this at the same time, and I'm thinking, am I getting repulsive looking and all that? I turned 70 years old.
Yay!
And a birthday to me is something I don't like to think about usually. Every once in a while, like every few decades, a birthday like really hits me. Like when I turned 31, that was like a major stepping stone for me. Because I always thought, oh, when I was younger, don't trust anybody over 30. And like I'm thinking, no one's gonna trust me. And so 31 became like a real hallmark of a memory for a birthday. And then when I turned 70, I think when I turned 31, I kept saying, but you're not 70. So I kept thinking about my whole like aging process and making comparisons to how the surface of the sculptures look, and looking in the mirror as I'm working, I'm like, whoa. So there is all this stuff going on in my head, so about like comparing my choices with the colors, my palette, choices with, you know, the surface of my skin compared to the surface of my sculpture skin. I started taking this really personally. And I've never done personal work before. My work was always so about the environment. I never did anything that was about me. But I think all our work is about yourself, you know, and it all comes out. But it was the first time I ever really deliberately or had the intention of exploring my feelings and my, you know, my emotions of what was going on in my life at the same time. So the wall pieces became sort of the balance to the grotesque. And who doesn't like a flower? Who doesn't like color? So my having this wall pieces next to the other pieces were really an important part of my exploring of all the feelings and the things that I was going through. So you'll see, like if you walk by the piece, there's little, you know, hidden things. This one is called the Manic Purist, and it was getting too grotesque for me, and I just put these fake nails on there just to humor myself and laugh about everything that was going on. This is the Fashionista, and I was thinking a lot about, for Fashionista, how, you know, supermodels and how we have these standards of beauty. Like 1 year it's popular to be really thin and skinny and wear certain clothes, and the next year what's in is being voluptuous, and so there's all these different standards that we take, you know, as if it's true, and it's not. They're all myths. It's like what fashion wants us to think. So basically, that's all.